welcome to episode 8 of Switching Screens. As always, I'm Anthony Doyle, and with me is Joshua Howe, who's my co-host, and this week we have Duncan Smith, who covers the general NBA for Hoops Habit, who has also written about the Detroit Pistons and the Miami Heat in the past. We're going to be talking about the trade deadline, some Detroit Pistons specific stuff, and just how that and the buyout market plays into what we're expecting for the rest of the season. So the first thing that hit me personally about this trade deadline is it was busy, it was interesting, it was really fun to be on Twitter, and not much really changed. Like, I don't actually think the playoff picture moved at all, really.
No. I mean, it didn't. I don't think I was talking about before we started that really the only deal that seemed to change anything for me was probably the Andre Iguodala trade, just because I think the Grizzlies get closer now to being a playoff team for sure. They're obviously hovering around that 8th spot, back and forth, fighting with some of the teams down there. So I think that deal helps them, obviously, because they traded a guy that wasn't playing with them all year, and they got some assets back, and it should, give them a little bit more depth to hopefully lock up the 8th spot and make a playoff run with Ja Morant, getting some experience, and I think that's pretty fun.
Yeah, Solomon Hill was decent for them this year, and Jay Crowder seemed like he was a good locker room presence for them. So giving up those two guys, I don't think is total. I don't think they really wanted to give up those two guys, but
yeah,
I think generally around the NBA, people are a little too low on Justice Winslow at this point, and Georgie Deng is also a nice pickup.
Yeah, he's good. He's good.
I see Memphis as having one of the best front courts in the league, and I mean, I know anybody who follows me on Twitter knows I've had some strong opinions about the Iguodala situation. The fact that they were able to move on from that situation in a way where they picked up real assets was big for Memphis, because obviously, what happened didn't sit right with the players from what we saw this week. With Dylan Brooks tweeting about it, and Ja Morant and a few other players wading into that as well. And I don't think Iguodala handled it as well as he probably could have, but maybe, depending on what we're going to see from Iguodala in Miami, maybe this was a win for Memphis, because I watched those finals last year. I'm not sure Andre Iguodala is the player a lot of people think he is.
Yeah, which is why it was so surprising to me that, the second year is a team option, but $15 million for Iguodala, potentially 30. I mean, that's a lot to get the extension right out of the gate, just through the trade. So I don't know. I'm kind of in the same camp. I have no idea how much is left in the tank for Iguodala, but obviously he's in his upper 30s now. He's got a lot of miles on him, including playoff miles. He's probably going to be a good locker room guy in a place he wants to be. He's got a lot of experience. He's a smart player for sure. In that sense, can definitely help a playoff team. But I mean, other than that, what he's actually going to give on the floor, I don't know. Is he a guy at this stage you actually can stick on the other team's best player? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm kind of in the same camp of leaning towards I wouldn't bet on it, at least not for long stretches. Maybe you can cycle him in and out, and maybe have him in more limited minutes, and he can do it that way. But I'd be overly cautious of it for a guy who hasn't played in so long.
Duncan, you probably watch more Miami than we do. I haven't watched as much of them this year as I probably should have. Do you feel like Crowder, Hill, and Iguodala really moves the needle for them?
I think there might be some movement of the needle, but it seems to me that getting a little clearance from the hard cap this season, cutting, I think it's something along the lines of $28 million off their cap number next year, and not affecting their 2021 space is maybe not as big, because I think that they see themselves as the team that can really at least push the Bucks, if not contend for a title. I think that when you combine the potentially marginal on-court improvements with the sudden leap forward in their financial flexibility down the road, I think that is that's a pretty significant win for the Heat. Plus, they get rid of Dion Waiters, who has been nothing but trouble for the most part this season for them. They get off James Johnson, who has had his own issues this year, and they do this all while being able to, even if they're just like breaking even from a talent and impact perspective on the floor, which I think that they're doing better than. Even if that's it, they had a major win here.
When it looked like, and as it looked like for about a day there, like that they were also going to pick up Danilo Gallinari, I thought that was a move that really would have vaulted them forward as a contender, because I thought Gallo was a perfect fit for helping them find a little bit more offense when they need it. He just seems to be a nice player for the personnel that the Miami has for their needs. And I was a little concerned as a Raptors guy that was something they were going to do, because I thought that would make them a lot more dangerous against the Raptors. When that fell apart, to me, that didn't really put Miami, or that kept Miami out of the list of teams that I consider the top tier of the East. But
yeah, I mean, I still think that they're probably, the Bucks are in a tier of their own. I think the Raptors are probably solidifying themselves as the next tier down, and then you've got the Heat and the Celtics. I think are battling it out for whatever that third tier might be considered before the deadline and after the deadline. I think the Heat got a little better, but I don't think that they really separated themselves from the pack necessarily.
Yeah, that adds up to me, I think. That trade just made sense for both teams. The first trade that broke in the morning, I think, was the D'Angelo Russell Andrew Wiggins trade, which was the Timberwolves getting Russell, Jacob Evans, Amari Spellman, the Warriors getting Wiggins, a top 3 protected first, and a 2021 second. The first is in 2021 as well. This was a weird trade to me. I get why Minnesota did it. I get that D'Angelo Russell is one of Cat's best friends. I don't like the fit between them. I think they're going to get pick and rolled to death on defense. I don't know what it does for Minnesota to move their ceiling and to make them a noticeably better team. And for the Warriors, Andrew Wiggins is as a Canadian writer, as a Canadian guy, and I know, we all hear the Wiggins stuff, that he's just going to figure it out one of these days. I don't know if he is. And I think Steph and Clay will make his life a lot easier. I don't think he really makes the Warriors a lot better. So the Warriors, if that pick pays off, I see the trade as a win for them. But otherwise, I see this as a trade that has real potential for both teams to lose it.
Yeah, the weird thing to me was that, the Warriors, that Andrew Wiggins trade would have been there later on as well. So I don't know. It felt like a little weird that it happened now, I guess. I don't really know. But man, the Timberwolves wanted Russell so bad. They were chasing him for so long. I think they might have actually, the front office might have exploded if they didn't get D'Angelo Russell. I don't know what was going to happen there. But I'm with you. I've never been a big D'Angelo Russell guy. I think he's fine, and he's a guy who can put up a bunch of numbers really quick at times. I don't think he's a really high impact player. Putting him in there with Cat, okay, I guess they really needed a point guard. He's a guy who can actually deliver a post entry pass, so there's that. But yeah, it doesn't make me super excited. Andrew Wiggins, I'm more excited about that because on the optimistic side of things, what we saw from Wiggins earlier this season was fun, was good. He obviously showed some improvement in areas, some things that we haven't really seen before, which was kind of nice. Obviously, that's tapered off. But, hey, put him on a team for the first time where he doesn't have to be the second option. Maybe things change for him a little bit, and he gets to be a part of a winning organization. He has a superior coach now, stuff like that. Maybe he just needs a change of scenery, and this was time. And if he embraces it and he's open to things, then maybe they figure it out for him, and he can have a nice remainder of his career as a solid role player who can get you buckets when you need it, and just make some solid passes and hopefully play some decent defense, and just kind of stick in as a cog rather than having to be a guy that everybody's watching with a spotlight on him every night.
I think it's a deal that is not like a home run for either. I don't think that it makes anybody much better. I think that there might be something to the change of scenery for both. It sounds as though the Warriors aren't going to miss D'Angelo from the comments I think that have come out.
No.
To be honest, I haven't dug deep into them. I haven't really read the pieces about what Kerr and company have had to say about D'Angelo Russell, which is not a great look, I gotta say, as an organization. And I'm kind of surprised that it's the Warriors that are doing the whole Boston Celtics leak it into the media after a guy's gone. It seems as though they're above that, but you never know. Apparently not. So I'm happy for the Timberwolves that they finally got their man. I was literally running out of synonyms for the word lust and trying to describe what their feeling was. So I'm happy that they've got a fresh. They've got D'Angelo finally. Just having a new presence in the locker room might do some good. It will probably keep Karl-Anthony Towns mollified for some period of time now. Not that exactly that he had any kind of leverage in the summer if he was to demand a trade, but you don't want your guy in year 2 of a 5-year deal thinking like that either. So the fact that the organization did go out on a limb and make a move like this for him, I think that might have some value. The Warriors, I don't really know what the Warriors are thinking right now, but they did manage to open up a couple roster spots and fill in. They now have an NBA legal team, I believe, as of last check, which they didn't a couple days ago. So everything with the Warriors is just about trying to stay alive practically until Steph and Clay and everybody get back, and then just plug some talent in around them, and things will probably be fine. And we can debate whether Wiggins fits better than D'Angelo with Steph and Clay, but he probably does. There's a chance he does. And those guys are going to be good enough that if they stay healthy when they're back, the ceiling is going to be really high, regardless of whether one of them marginally fits better or not. So, I don't love it, but it's okay.
I think I'd feel better about this if Andrew Wiggins didn't make like $95 million over the next 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Because he's still an interesting player who can do a lot of good things, and maybe he develops right. But that is just a high price to pay on the maybe. And I know he promised he would get better, but so far, hasn't happened that much.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota's they're interesting though. They play tonight, and they are going to look like a completely different team than they did before the trade deadline. They have 7 new players. Between that and the Covington deal, the Covington deal was. I looked at that trade and the 12 players involved, like the Rockets getting Robert Covington and Jordan Bell and a future second. The Hawks got Clint Capella and Nene. The Timberwolves got Malik Beasley, Juan Hernan Gomez, Evan Turner, Jared Vanderbilt, and a 2020 first, which is lottery protected. The Nuggets got Gerald Green, Keita Bates-Diop, and Shabazz Napier, Noah Vonleh, and a 2020 first.
Mm-hmm.
That was a weird trade. The Rockets looked great in their first game, and then last night they looked horrible without Russ. The Hawks, I like Clint Capella for the Hawks. I do like that part of it. I thought the Nuggets were setting up something else. They didn't do anything else. And the Timberwolves, I think Malik Beasley is a nice player. Juan Hernan Gomez has some potential. I've heard good things about Jared Vanderbilt. I don't actually know as much about him, but I've heard some good things. So, maybe Minnesota can hit on some of these periphery guys that they picked up over the 2 trades. There's some talent there, and find some pieces to fill in around Russell and Cat, and that would be good for them. I'd like to see Cat stay. I like it when stars stay in the smaller markets and we don't have everybody in LA and New York.
Mm-hmm.
The Covington trade, like, do you guys think this is a better Houston team than it was before the deadline?
I think it's a different team. It's a very different team. We're gonna have to watch and see. Like they beat the Lakers and then got bombed by the Suns. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't even before this trade. I didn't really know what I thought about the Rockets. So it's still unclear. I think, but we're really not going to know much until the playoffs start. I think when you've got everybody. Russ isn't sitting out back-to-backs because there will be no back-to-backs. I think if health is not an issue, I think that we'll have a much better idea of what the team quality is when that happens.
What's interesting to me is I expected in Houston this year Russ was going to be the guy who was going to be the awkward fit, and Harden was still going to look great, but Russ was going to have a hard time figuring out where he fit. And over the last couple of weeks where they've started to win a lot more, it's kind of been the other way around, right? It's been Russ has been going off, and Harden has looked rough a lot.
I think he's been hurt, has he not?
I think he does have a lingering something. I'm not quite sure exactly what it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think Russ is picking up the slack, so to speak, and carrying some of the load. So, I definitely thought he was washed in the first couple months of the season, but he's really been doing it lately.
Isn't this kind of the concern with Harden though? Like Houston, the way they build that team around him, it always requires Harden to do so much and to play so many minutes, and like they push for him to win awards, be the MVP all the time because of it, but also at the same time, like, he never makes it to the playoffs with much left in the tank. And isn't that just, like, the flaw with what Houston does?
Yeah, for sure. I had my questions and doubts about the fit, and I still do, the fit with Russ. I don't think that the fit is as good as the fit with Chris Paul was in years past. But, just having a guy who can carry a really heavy load like Russ can might actually benefit them, like, as we get into the playoffs. I think maybe having Russ on the ball a lot more and having Harden off the ball some, it might actually be more conducive to a playoff style attack than Chris Paul, who the durability questions linger, and Russ he's still a freight train. That might actually be a combination that gets them a little further. I don't know if it really raises the ceiling, but it's a different angle on what the Rockets have been in the past, and I think that could be interesting to see how that develops.
Their tallest rotation player right now is Robert Covington too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that's the thing that gets me about that trade is like going into the playoffs. How do you play a series against Anthony Davis with like PJ Tucker and Robert Covington as your mates?
You hope. You hope it's going to work. I mean, you hope everything else works. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting as well, partly because I don't you guys can correct me if you're wrong, if you remember something, but I don't remember like a team that was ever like considered a title contender or a team that was going for a title, clearly going for a title, that like decided to go all in on a small ball team. Like there's teams that play small ball, but that, they don't have the option now to go to like, okay, we're going to have a bigger lineup. They just don't have that at all. So they're all in on this, and I don't think we've ever seen that before, which is at least interesting. I'm also in the same camp as Duncan. I don't think we've seen enough yet to know if it'll work, but I'm not really optimistic that it's gonna, play out super well against a team like the Lakers in the playoffs over the course of 7 games.
I think the closest thing might be like the 2016 finals after Bogut got hurt. Because I think after Bogut got hurt, the Warriors didn't really have a big man left in that series. And I also think that's part of why Cleveland won that series.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I think winning in the playoffs we treat it as one run to 16 games, but it's 4 runs to 4 games, and you have to have you have to be able to change what you do for different opponents and for different series. And like this Rockets team, they're really good at the one thing that they do, but it's the only thing that they do.
Yeah, yeah, it has to work. It either works or it doesn't. I mean, and that's what happened against the Warriors. You know, the closest they ever got, obviously, and they didn't have Chris Paul, but I mean, they did what they always do, and it got them to that point, and it just didn't work in the end. They were so close, but like that was their thing, and they were going to stick with it. And you've heard Daryl Morey talk about, you know, after that series, like, well, we wouldn't do anything different because we just missed a bunch of shots. Like, mathematically, you're still going to win most of the time. So the way that whole organization works, that's just they're going to bet on whatever gives them the highest chance. They're going to do what the math says, and they're betting now that the way they play here, they're going to go all in on, you know, the pace and space, clearly the shooting the threes, that they don't need a traditional rim protection, that's going to be able to get them to where they need to go. I don't know if it's going to do it, but they're going all in now more than I've ever seen any other team do it. So
there's something interesting too about the idea of going away from the typical playoff format, you know, where you do a thing, the other team adjusts, you readjust, and so forth, you know. And before long, you're both a million miles deep in the weeds, you know. The Rockets, instead of like playing the adjust counter adjust game, they're basically just like setting their own strategy. And if you want to adjust to that, so be it. You know, for better or worse, they don't really have something to go to if that doesn't work. But you know, they're getting away from the typical traditional model of adjustments and exploits, and they're just saying you adjust to us or you counter us in whatever way, and see if you can do it. And you know, I mean, I think that the Lakers and Clippers and the elites of the West are probably capable of handling that. But it's just really interesting in just like setting a strategy and just doing that and forcing your opponent to be the one making all the adjustments in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And like they're going to play such high variance ball that there's a chance that even against a team that should beat them, they just hit a whole pile of threes, because the reverse of the Warriors series could happen. I mean,
yeah,
they took, even against the Suns the other night, they took 48 threes. If you happen to have a couple guys get hot, like, you can turn any game around in a hurry when you're shooting like that. And they're mostly threes from good three-point shooters.
yeah.
So, they're such an interesting, weird team, and I want to watch a lot of them down the stretch run of this season, because I'm very curious how this all works out. And I like Robert Covington. I like his fit there. I like PJ Tucker, and I love the fact that he embraces going against guys much bigger than him, but I really worry about his body wearing down.
Yeah.
And that's a concern for me. But yeah, Houston will be interesting to watch. The other contender that made a move was the Clippers picked up Marcus Morris. They traded for him and Isaiah Thomas, who they're going to waive, it sounds like. And they traded away Mo Harkless and the 2021st to the Knicks and Jerome Robinson to the Wizards. There's a lot of mixed reactions about what Marcus Morris does for the Clippers. There's some people who think it really helps them. There's some people who think it doesn't help them a whole lot. I land more on the it's not as big of a deal side of things, I think. Where do you guys sit on Marcus Morris for the Clippers?
I feel similar. He's had a great season, but it's kind of amazing to me that he was like the prize of the trade period. You know, you know, like they the newsbreakers like Woj and Shams kept referring it to the pursuit of Marcus Morris as an arms race, and I was just like rolling on my floor. You know, like. So I mean, yeah, I think that the Clippers are better. Certainly, it's an improvement. But you know, like almost any trade, as you look at it, like no trade is quite as good as it looks at first glance, and it's never as bad as it looks at first glance either, depending on like which side of the fence you are on with the trade. So I think that it'll be a marginal improvement, but it's not going to be like a deal breaker. I certainly wouldn't put any money on Marcus Morris going out there and winning a playoff game for them.
No, yeah, it gives them another, you know, solid offensive threat. He can create a little bit. You know, he does what we've seen him do. I mean, I think he's solid, but yeah, I mean, and they gave up Maurice Harkless, who's a good defender. They didn't give up nothing, so I guess yeah, like I definitely didn't I didn't see Morris as a prize certainly, but I mean a solid role player, yeah, at his peak, so he could be very helpful in the game if you need a guy to hit some shots. There you go. The thing I'm most concerned about with him is actually not on court stuff. It's the off court stuff. Just because, and people kind of have brushed this aside because of last year in Toronto, although I don't think it's, and I haven't watched every single Clippers game and I'm not around the Clippers, but from what I've heard, it's not exactly the same sort of scenario what was going on in Toronto last year with, the regular season being a bumpy ride. But, there's been stuff coming out about the Clippers locker room that they've had some turmoil, some issues, guys not happy with certain things. Montrezl Harrell had that interview to the media. So, adding a guy like Marcus Morris, who is historically a little bit of a turbulent human being, and we saw that just recently.
We're so Canadian. We're so Canadian, man. He's a real dick. No, he's he's of debatable character. And
Yeah. He says some things sometimes that aren't so great. And I just think that if there is, and I don't really know how real the stuff with the Clippers is, but if it is real, and they do have some issues, throwing a guy like that in there, maybe it's not the best thing. So maybe that also becomes a problem for them. But again, I'm not close enough to the situation to know for sure. But yikes. That's all I'll say about that. On-court fit, it's whatever. But I'd be more concerned about what's going on in the locker room.
Yeah, on-court, he's having a great catch-and-shoot season with the Knicks. His effective field goal percentage on catch-and-shoot is 67.1%. Which is really nice to have, given that he's going to be playing off Kawhi and Paul George a lot. But, he's another guy added to who prefers to create his own shot than create a shot for somebody else on a team that has a lot of those guys. He's not a great locker room presence on a team that could use some great locker room presences. I was hoping for the Clippers' sake that what they would go do at the trade deadline is get a guy who wants to create shots for other guys. Because even with Kawhi's improved passing, Kawhi is still, his element is creating his own shot, not other guys'.
Yeah, I think and this is just from not the actual trade perspective, but for a guy coming in, that's why I think Iguodala just as a player would have been a much better fit for a team like that. Because he knows how to work within a team first offense. He is a good locker room guy. He brings a lot of the stuff that you would like to have on a team like that. And I think you don't need him as much.
Are we sure Iguodala is a good locker room guy? I mean, are we just basing that on 4 years with one of the greatest teams in NBA history? Because, I mean...
Sure. I mean, mostly, yeah. I'm mostly basing it on that. I thought during that time, personally, I know there was obviously, they had some ups and downs, too, and they were just so talented that they got over a lot of that. But, I mean, I never heard Iguodala being part of those... that stuff. But maybe you're right. Maybe he's not. I don't know. But I've always thought that he, when he wants to be, he is a good locker room guy.
Because it didn't end well in Denver for him either. I mean, there was the George Karl accusing him of being a Warriors spy in the playoffs thing.
Yeah, well, yeah. There's a lot of stuff with George Karl.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Let's go to the weirdest trade at the trade deadline for me. Andre Drummond for John Henson, Brandon Knight in a second. This trade, my first reaction is, what is everybody involved in this trade doing? I guess for Detroit, the feeling was just it was time to move on from Drummond, and that was the best they could do.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess for Cleveland, Drummond is talented, and they don't have that many talented NBA players. But Drummond is a win-now team for a team that shouldn't be trying to win now in Cleveland.
Mm.
And I don't think Detroit got back any players or any assets that they want back for a guy who they've been trying to sell to the league as a franchise player.
Nope.
And
I mean,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I get it better from the Pistons' perspective than I do from the Cavs' perspective. Like, it was time to move on. I think that there might be a addition by subtraction angle here. Christian Wood went out and got 27 and 12 last night, I think, against Steven Adams. So it's not to say that Andre Drummond's rebounding and everything is like easily replaced. But it is to say that maybe what he did best is not especially valuable in today's NBA. I think that is kind of a growing piece of knowledge. So I think that they were eager to get that cap space for next season. I think cap space probably means less next season than it does the season after that. But at the same time, like, if you're going to reboot, like, you might as well hit that reboot button sooner than later. And so I get where they're coming from that perspective. As far as only getting I believe it's a 2023 second round pick, whatever is less desirable between the Cavs and the Warriors pick that season. It's not an especially valuable asset, but up until the deadline, like deadline day, essentially, the best thing that we were hearing the Pistons were getting offered in return was expiring salary only. So this is slightly better, which is a small win at the very least. But yeah, just getting that cap space, hitting the reset button, which is what they're going to be able to do after this year comes to a close. I think that those things by themselves have some value. So, not much of a return. But as far as like the goal that they're trying to accomplish, they hit it. For the Cavs, I don't really know why they have Andre Drummond, Tristan Thompson, who they probably could have traded but didn't, and won't be buying out, and Kevin Love on the same team. To me, that's silly. It doesn't. It's
especially when you have a point guard who doesn't like to pass.
Yeah. But now Colin Sexton and Andre Drummond are going to be practicing together every day, so maybe Colin's finally going to get to dunk on Andre. Finally, he tried. I don't think it was the last game that the Cavs blew the Pistons out. That he got his. He just kept trying over and over to dunk on Dre, and I think Bruce Brown picked him off a couple times. I think Tony Snell knocked the ball away from him on a breakaway. I think Andre just stuffed him at the rim. Like, he tried so hard to dunk on him. It was hilarious. But yeah, so now just by sheer volume alone, he'll probably get a couple in now.
My question for the Pistons is, like, if they were trying this hard to move Drummond, why didn't they move any other guys? Because, like, did Derrick Rose have no market? I know we all have feelings about Derrick Rose and all that stuff, but it seemed like there were teams who were interested, and then there's some other guys on the Pistons who I look at and I say, the right team could probably have used this guy, and I can't see there being absolutely no market. And I'm curious why, if they really wanted to move on, they didn't try to pick up some assets on moving other guys.
I think Markieff Morris has been hurt a lot. He's one of the ones that I think was most expected to get it, at least like a reasonable second round pick. But he's been hurt quite a bit. He's been decent when he's played. Like, I do not have his numbers up, and I'm not going to look them up. But he's been shooting pretty well. I think he's having like a career best 3-point shooting year this year. So I think he's another one that could have like a marginal impact on a good team. But I think the injuries, and he's out tonight as well, I believe. I think that those just added too much of an unstable element for a team that would seek to add him. And then with Derrick Rose, he's hurt too. He's hurt, I think, through the All-Star break because he pulled out of the skills competition for injury-related matters. So I think that probably cratered his market. I know the Pistons were hoping to go forward with him into next season. Ed Stefanski, Pistons senior advisor, who is the de facto general manager for the Pistons. He was talking about how the Pistons, now that they're entering sort of this youth movement, they want to have like an adult in the locker room. You know, they want to have a vet. The kids love Derrick Rose. All the kids in the NBA love Derrick Rose. So they don't want to go into this uncertain future with no experienced veterans on the roster, and I get that. And I think that there just wasn't much of a market once he got hurt. So, considering the injuries that have just absolutely like wiped this team off the face of the map this season, I don't think it's a big surprise that there just weren't moves out there.
So what's the Detroit Pistons' long-term outlook at this point? Because I see some decent players there. Sekou has shown some nice things this season. Luke Kennard, I like. But, Blake Griffin, when they traded for him last year, it looked good at first. It looked really nice for a little while. And then the injuries came and stuff like that. Where do the Pistons kind of see themselves going over the next couple seasons? Are they going to head into a full rebuild and just kind of eat a couple of bad seasons and see where that takes them? Are they going to still try to stay relevant? What do you see their outlook as being?
Well, what they will probably end up doing is try and retool as quickly as they can. They'll probably throw a bunch of money at Fred VanVleet and what other ever free agents they can draw in with their now expansive. I think they're going to hold about $40 million in cap space next season. So they're probably going to try and just retool on the fly. What they should do is use the next 2-3 years of Blake Griffin's contract and just take on bad salary, build a real war chest of draft picks and draft assets, and build that way, because they're really gonna struggle to be able to put any kind of real contending quality team on the floor as long as that contract is still on the roster. So, but yeah, what they'll probably do is they're going to rebuild as quickly as possible, and we may find ourselves here again in the not too distant future, simply because I don't think that there's much appetite for a long rebuild, even though that's exactly what they built for themselves with, what Stan Van Gundy left them with, rather, when they traded for Blake Griffin. Because, the sad thing is that this thing that they put together would have worked. I think this is at least like a high 40s win team if everybody's healthy. It's just like it was built on a foundation of shifting sands, because everybody they brought in, everybody that has really any significant value, they're all injury prone, and all those injury prone guys got hurt, every one of them.
After they picked up Blake Griffin last year, like from what I remember, they went on a pretty good run for a little while there when they did have guys healthy, and they looked like a team that might do some damage in the playoffs for a little while.
Well, 2 years ago, when they got him 2 years ago, yeah, they got off to a nice start. I think they started off 5-0 after that, but I think that might have also been sort of like post-trade deadline scheduling benefits for them. Last year, I think they were 6th seed, looking at making a push for the 5 seed before Blake's knee really started to deteriorate. But yeah, aside from depth in Blake's knee, last season, they ended up falling to an 8th seed, and obviously that was sheer death matching up against the Bucks in the first round. But if only health wasn't a thing, this team would be a whole lot better. And for better or worse, like, this rebuild would have been delayed, and they would probably be a 45, 48 win team this year if all the guys who are on this team were healthy. So I don't blame, for that matter, I don't blame the Pistons for going for it and trying to get Derrick Rose and Markieff Morris and all these guys have been actually really good. They've been better than expected. It's just like they haven't been able to stay on the floor. And Reggie Jackson only played the first 2 games before missing 3 months. Blake, I think he's only played 18 games this season, and only a couple of them were any good. And it was like obvious from the jump that that knee was no good. So they were doomed from the start, and it's a shame because there was a decent plan to build a fun, um, not not destitute team for this year.
I feel really bad for Blake Griffin because
Oh yeah,
he's a guy who had a ton of talent. He's had a really great career, but when I watched him this year, he just doesn't look like a guy he might never have it again. Is what I saw this year, and I feel like he's not going to be remembered for the right reasons a lot because people look at those Clipper teams and they don't want to give them the proper credit for how good they were, and I kind of feel the same way about like that first year in Detroit when they were a better team than people wanted to give them credit for.
yeah, I totally agree. And last year he had I believe it was the best 3-point shooting season any Piston has ever had. Like the guy completely reinvented himself. The athleticism. It comes and goes and fits in spurts, but he's definitely not the same athlete he was. Like he's not blowing by guys. Let me try that again. Anyway, yeah, he doesn't have the same explosiveness and everything. So he completely reinvented his game and became better than passing 3-point shooter. His success was largely volume based, but at the same time, if you've got a guy shooting 7 or 8 threes per game, he's hitting 35%. That's reasonable half court offense right there. And Blake was able to do it, and it's just a shame that even though he reinvented himself, he just couldn't stave off the injuries. So yeah, it's somewhat encouraging that if he can get enough lift to get that 3-point shot off, which was even a problem this year. Maybe some of that'll be around in the future. Stefanski in his availability yesterday said that Blake should be healthy by June. I mean, they also said that he wouldn't miss any team activities, or he'd be good to go before this season started, and that was most definitely not accurate. So I'm taking Stefanski's words with a grain of salt there. But yeah, I mean, the contract is bad, but maybe there's still something there with the player, depending on what they end up bringing in next year, because they're probably going to try and field a competitive team, for better or worse.
That feels like a rough task. Just looking at the roster right now.
Yeah. They're going to benefit from being one of few teams that have cap space, but it's Andre Drummond would have been the best free agent available if he opted out. So not the best time to have cap space.
A lot of people talk a lot of the time about like organizations that the league is better off with those organizations being good. And we talk about like the Knicks, the Lakers, things like that. I think it's good for basketball in general if Detroit is good because when I think back to like 2004 to 2006, the Ben Wallace, Richard Hamilton, Chauncey Billups era, that arena was a lot of fun to watch, and that team was fun, and they drew pretty good crowds. It was a great basketball atmosphere, and I think that atmosphere was good for the league. I'd like the Pistons to figure it out. It's kind of a depressing outlook right now.
You know who says that the league is better with a good team in LA or a good team in New York? It's not NBA fans. It is the media guys who don't want to go to Indianapolis or Oklahoma City or Detroit or Cleveland in June. That's who it is. So, I mean, we can talk about media biases and stuff like that. But look at what happened when LeBron went from the Cavs to the Lakers. Now just nobody watches the Cavs. There aren't more people watching the Lakers. You have just created an entire fan base of casual viewers at the very least. So if the Pistons are winning 60 games and they have 3 All-Stars, you better believe that everybody in Detroit is watching those games. And you're not losing anything from the major markets because they are going to be watched by a large portion of the population anyway. So that's just a little tangent there, but it's a small sliver of people who are in basketball who think that the NBA needs really good teams in LA and big cities like that. And it's simply because they don't want to go to Oklahoma City and Detroit in June. That's my feeling.
The Knicks remain one of the most profitable franchises in the league. is all
Yeah,
you really
they
need
will.
to say.
They will never have to be good again, and they will sell it every game until the end of time.
Yeah. As
Yeah,
somebody who lives in Toronto and the Leafs play not far from here, I can agree wholeheartedly with that.
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean the Leafs went through decades where they just like they couldn't win games to save their lives, and yet all across Canada you saw Toronto Maple Leafs hats everywhere.
They are the Lakers of the NHL.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I I want to talk a little bit about the buyout market, and like the two big ones we've seen so far are Marvin Williams, and there was another one yesterday, and now I can't think of it. But I mean, it looks like Darren Collison might sign with a team. The Reggie Jackson was reported as maybe being bought out.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know exactly where those reports are coming from. I think it was Stein who had the report, and I'm sure that it's based in some, fact or rumor. Reggie said last night he hasn't even thought about it. He hasn't talked to anybody about it. Stefanski said the same thing. It's not even something they considered. I personally would love it if he did get bought out. The report was that he was considering a buyout and then going to the Clippers because he's friends with Paul George. Also, the reason the Hawks were supposedly tied to Andre Drummond before was because Trae Young and Andre Drummond are friends. So I think that maybe a little too much is put into relationships as far as these deals go. But I'm a Reggie guy, one of the few. So yeah, if Reggie Jackson ended up winning an NBA championship this season after the year he's had and the stretch he's had in Detroit, he got booed in his home opener this year. Yeah, if he's the first Piston expat to win a championship, I would be so far beyond thrilled.
I think he would be a great fit with the Clippers if he did get bought out.
Yeah, play 15, 18 minutes a night, low load, play off the ball now and then. Yeah, I think he would be a really nice fit if he got bought out with any major contender right now.
Milwaukee's getting Marvin Williams, and like I know we tend to overrate the buyout market. And I think Marvin Williams, if he plays 15 minutes for them and just fills in some minutes where he's asked to grab some rebounds, play a little bit of defense, and hit corner threes, he fits what Milwaukee's going to want him to do perfectly. He's not going to like make them massively better because Milwaukee's so good that it's hard to make them that much better. But he's going to be another weapon that they have, and I mean, he fits well.
Yeah, he's a cherry on the cake type guy for them. Michael Kidd Gilchrist got bought out by Charlotte today as well.
I saw that they're expecting him to go to Dallas, and I like that for Dallas. I think their wing depth is kind of not great. He can defend, which they need. He's not going to shoot, but like I'd like to see them use him kind of like the Raptors use Rondae Hollis Jefferson. Just have him in the dunker spot.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I still have some belief in him. Obviously, like that jumper's still janky, but guy can defend. He can do some stuff.
I have been a Michael Kidd Gilchrist fan pretty much since the draft, and I keep hoping that he's gonna figure it out. And it's just like, it's been rough.
It's been a rough time. Yeah. I wanted to bring up real quick the Sixers just because I'm curious to know from both of you guys did you expect the Sixers to do a move like they did, like something that was almost hardly significant? Like, did you think they would push harder to do something more significant than what they did just because of how much talk there's been about nothing really to do with the talent, but just to do with the team itself, that it doesn't seem to work, that there's all this potentially internal stuff, that there's been rumors about Brett Brown, stuff like this. Did you think that they would have done something more than they did? I'm just curious because I thought they should have, but they did.
I wanted them to. The thing is, like, I don't think they were going to trade Al Horford because they just gave him that giant contract, and they weren't getting value according to what they just gave him. Like, with that huge contract, you weren't getting a lot back for Al Horford because there's some of that's going to be sunk cost for any team trading for him. Tobias Harris has been so up and down. I don't know what his trade value looks like. I know there are people who love him, and he does some good things for them. That contract, I don't like it. And I don't think the Sixers are going to or really should move on from Simmons or Embiid. And if you think all of those pieces are locked in place, it's hard to see what that move is for them to make a bigger move.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to some extent, like, Elton Brand has been a little risk averse as a president of basketball operations there.
Sure.
So I don't know why they moved on from James Ennis. Like, I actually thought he was pretty good there. I thought he fit pretty well.
Yeah.
That was after the trade with the Warriors, right? They had to move 2 guys or waive 2 guys.
Yeah.
One of them they waived Trey Burks, and I think they just had to move somebody. So yeah, James Ennis is a weird choice because it seems as though he was a contributor. But yeah, they had to get rid of somebody by the deadline.
James Ennis was one of their few guys on the roster who shoots like above 34% from 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, the Sixers are so weird because I picked them to win the championship at the beginning of the season because I saw them as a team who really had this potential to be a defensive juggernaut. And, you know, I figured with Embiid and with Simmons, they're gonna find enough offense on a regular night that they don't have to be great if they can be great defensively, and they can get it done enough. And like, Embiid he's been hurt on and off, but he also just kind of hasn't been that dominant this year most of the season. And Simmons has been better without Embiid, and I'm not a believer that they need to split the 2 of them up, but I do see that it's not really working.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was interesting because, I mean, obviously, I'm sure there wasn't a lot of large, you know, significant moves to be made that were out there. I always, you know, I for like a couple months was working on the best way to get Chris Paul to the Sixers with a trade machine because I thought that would be so fun. He fixes almost all of their problems, at least to an extent. But obviously, you know, Oklahoma City having a great season, I don't think they wanted to trade Chris Paul. I doubt they'd probably like have a conversation about it, but I don't think it would really go anywhere. But something like that, I thought they should have looked into more than it seemed like they were going to. However, I mean, this is still basically the same team that I saw at the beginning of the season, like roster-wise, and I had the same opinion as you, Anthony, about them going to the finals. So, you know, you get them into the playoffs, and maybe things switch around, and I've heard from so many Sixers people that a lot of the time they say it's just effort. There's something going on where they just don't seem to be locked in. And maybe in the playoffs that happens, and we saw how dangerous they were last year. On paper, they're not that much worse than last year. Some people could argue talent-wise, maybe they're a little better, a little more spread out. Obviously, I probably wouldn't because they don't have Jimmy Butler, and he was super important in that Raptors series. But, I mean, hey, maybe they get into the playoffs and all of a sudden they really do lock in, and that was the problem the whole time. But I don't know. To get to this point in the season and have had so many flops like they have had, it's pretty demoralizing, I think. So I was a little surprised they didn't push harder to try and do something.
The biggest question I have about the Sixers at this point in the season is, why did they think they signed Al Horford? Because, like, I know what Al Horford is good at. I know where Al Horford can help them, but, like, did they know where Al Horford can help them? Because a lot of the times it seems like they just don't really know what makes Al Horford a good player.
Yeah, I think Al Horford thinks they don't know that.
Yeah.
He said some comments about being frustrated.
Because, maybe they just signed him to have another center on the floor that can keep above water during the non-Embiid minutes, because during the Raptors series it was awful. Like, Greg Monroe was a mess during that series. But they gave him, like, $120 million?
Yeah.
It's a huge contract.
Yeah.
It's a huge contract.
That's a lot of money to pay for a guy
for your backup center.
Yeah.
So I think it still can work. Like you said, if they get into the playoffs and Embiid suddenly becomes the dominant monster we know he can be, and their defense finds that level, they're dangerous. But at some point we kind of have to accept that they might also be the team that we're watching throughout the season.
Yeah.
Did you?
They.
Well, we're talking about
sorry.
Eastern Conference teams, though. Did you guys expect Boston to do something? Because I kind of did.
I didn't really expect anybody to do anything. I was surprised by how much activity there was. I did find it interesting that all the top Eastern Conference teams basically set it out. But I also think that the Bucks and the Raptors and apparently the Celtics all see themselves as more or less finished products. And it's just a matter of seeing how they match up in the playoffs. So I mean, I think there's something to being fine with where you're at. I think, I would have liked to maybe see a move, but I'd always like to see a move. So,
I
just
Go
wonder
ahead.
about the Celtics. Like, how comfortable are they being in a situation where they might have to play Enes Kanter minutes against, like, Philadelphia or Milwaukee or Toronto in a playoff series?
Yeah, you know what? I think, I don't know how much this factors in, but I do think a significant part of Boston's whole thing this season is just the stark difference from the last Kyrie season to this one. I think everybody there is just enjoying the ride this season. And I think that plays a part in it. I really do think that team is, they like each other and there's a cohesiveness there. And they like Brad Stevens. And what they're doing is working. So I think they're honestly, we're okay with, let's just keep this group together after everything that went down last season and, try and do what we can with this group going into the playoffs.
How do we talk about Kyrie Irving at this point? Like, he's obviously one of the most incredible scoring guards in the league, and he's just he's fun to watch when he's going off. But, like, how do we talk about the other stuff properly? Because I have so much trouble with this.
I know I don't have an answer to that question. There are some topics that I have no expertise in when it comes to the NBA and topics that swirl around the NBA and its players. There are topics that I am far from expert on when it comes to some of these guys, as we know. So more or less, I just try to focus on the basketball stuff and let the real experts focus on mental health and in the case of other players, legal and other type issues, and that ain't for me. I don't really know how to address it, so I think in the case that I don't know how to address it, I just try to leave that to people who are more qualified and capable, and just try and share their work. Like, for example, I think Jackie McMullen has a pretty good finger on the pulse of things, Kyrie. So I feel as though my role in that case is to read it and learn from it for my own edification, and retweet and share, and that's kind of how I try to contribute to the discourse about guys like Kyrie and what he brings to an organization.
Mm-hmm.
It's beyond my pay grade. We'll put it that way.
At this point, it wasn't as big of a trade deadline as maybe we were hoping for. It was bigger than I expected. Basketball's been really fun this season. Like, I just want to be able to turn the discourse around the NBA to the basketball going forward. And that's like heading into this playoffs, which should be fun. I really hope we can have dialogue around the league focused on that. And I've been pretty disappointed in a lot of the dialogue this season, because a lot of it's been pre-agency and stuff like that. I mean, I wish I could say I'd read more stuff about why the Bucks are great than about where Giannis is going to go in 2 years. But I don't feel like that's true.
Right.
And I'm kind of excited for the Eastern Conference playoffs, because I think we're going to have an incredible 4-5 series, whoever's in that series, and it could be Boston, Miami, Philadelphia, Indiana. I mean, Toronto could slip because we can't seem to stay healthy to save our lives.
You also can't seem to lose.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of nice right now.
Another thing that you guys just can't do.
Well, we haven't played Detroit in a while, and we're like what, 2-7 in our last 9 or something against Detroit.
We just played a week ago, 10 days ago, recently.
Yeah.
I mean, last year we couldn't beat Detroit.
That's true.
Yeah.
I feel like it was those guys just. I feel like it was those guys just throwing Dwayne a bone. You know.
I mean, we've got Brooklyn, Minnesota, Brooklyn between now and the All-Star game, and that's a real opportunity for the Raptors to go into the All-Star game. On what, a 16-game winning streak?
I believe that would be 16.
Yeah, so Terrence Davis has been incredible, and I can't talk enough about how they found this guy who told teams he didn't want them to draft him in the second round if they weren't going to give him guaranteed money, and that confidence in himself is so evident in his play, and I don't know how the Raptors front office keeps finding these guys and other teams keep letting them slip through the cracks.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's not that long ago, like when the Spurs would draft a guy in like 27 or something like that, everybody would be like, "Oh Jesus, here we go again." And now it's like the Raptors have signed so and so from their 905 squad. You're like, "Oh no, here we go again."
I mean, he was on Denver's summer league team, and Denver's a pretty good organization.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm having fun watching basketball. Like Josh and I were talking before you joined the call earlier that last year for the Raptors was special because it was a championship team, but like the first 75 games of the season last year were pretty much pure stress. It was like they didn't look like they were all on the same page. There was so many injuries in and out. There was like that 3-week stretch where Greg Monroe was our starting center because Jonas Valanciunas had a broken thumb. None of us were sure how the Gasol trade was going to work out because he didn't look great in Memphis and he didn't look really engaged. And then like 2 weeks before the playoffs, everybody got healthy. They went on a winning streak, and all of a sudden everything seemed like they were figuring it out. And the playoffs obviously happened. So that part of last season was great. But this year, there's no expectations. The team keeps exceeding what expectations we do set. They're just having fun. If they don't win a championship this year, we can say, okay, we didn't have a superstar. We didn't win a championship. If they do have a great playoff run, it's all just gravy. Like, I can't remember a season as a sports fan where I've had more fun than this season.
Must be nice.
I've seen some people get maybe, like, in my opinion anyway, maybe a little too confident now because none of the top teams in the East or otherwise, really, unless you consider Marcus Morris a big move, really made any super significant moves to impact their ceiling. And I've seen some people now start to get into the mode of, hey, maybe the Raptors are good enough. Maybe they can get to the finals. And I'm not in that camp. But I
feel like 95% of basketball fans right now are sleeping on the Bucks.
I honestly, like watching the Bucks like just obliterate the Sixers the other day was like no one's stopping Giannis. Like at this point, I think we might have reached a point. And when we were doing this, the Bucks conversation with Ty a while ago, I'd mentioned about how I think part of the reason Giannis isn't looked at as like universally the best player in the league yet, even though I think he is because he hasn't had that moment in the playoffs, whatever that's going to be. I think maybe that comes this year. Because he's just so much better than everybody else. Like, he was destroying Joel Embiid. Like, he had one spin move on him in the post and, like, dunked and just, like, slid into the row and to the first row and got up and ran the other way. Like, he made him look like he was standing still. It was crazy. He's so good.
Per 100 possessions, he's having a better prime Shaq season than Shaq ever had. Like, just points, rebounds. He is... It's hard to put into words what we're watching. He's shooting 77% at the rim, like.
Yeah.
And as a team, like I'm on the NBA.com stats page, and because it's one of the worst sites on the internet, it's not loading for me right now. But if memory serves, the Bucks, their road net rating would be one of the best net ratings in NBA history by itself.
Yeah.
Like they really don't get enough credit as what might be one of the best teams of all time.
Yeah.
It's weird because I think when they lost 4 straight to the Raptors last year, everybody sat there and went, okay, the Raptors have revealed some fatal flaw in a team built around Giannis, which, like, isn't what happened. The Bucks were one bounce away from being up 3-0 on the Raptors, and that series goes a completely different way. That wasn't the Raptors blowing them out of the water. That was the Raptors getting the right bounces for 4 games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, it loaded. The Bucks net rating is plus 10.8 on the road.
That's insane.
That's insane.
Like, the Bucks might go just like 16-2 in the playoffs or something, and that wouldn't shock me.
Yeah.
And if they do that, also, all the free agency talk that people have spent time on this season, I feel like that's over. I feel like if the Bucks win the championship this year, there's no way Giannis is leaving.
Yep. I was just thinking that. I think it's actually really likely that Giannis is going to end up staying, because I think even if they get to the finals, which they've never gotten to before, he'll probably stay. Like, I keep going back to, like, this guy's so loyal. They keep going back to, like, the Jason Kidd thing. He was, like, calling Jason Kidd, like, when he got fired. Like, that's insane. Like, Jason Kidd was a bad coach. But because of how loyal Giannis is, he was, like, trying to get him rehired, save his job. Like, this guy cares about wherever he is and the people that take a chance on him.
I've had a couple of different Bucks writers tell me that the only thing that concerns them is that Giannis will go play for Masai. And that's for the loyalty reason, because Masai has that connection that goes back to before Giannis was ever in the NBA. And, like, they said it's not even the Raptors, it's Masai, wherever he is.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And, but I think the Bucks make the finals or they win a championship in these next 2 seasons. It's done, and we move on to other conversations.
Yeah. That'd kind of be a relief, in a way.
It would be. Like, I make the jokes about Giannis going to the Raptors, too, and I feel a little bit bad about it when I do it. But, like, I was talking to Ty about this the other day, and this is weird for me because as somebody who covers the Raptors, you have to be cognizant of the team's long-term plans.
Yes.
And it is very out there that the Raptors' long-term plan is going after Giannis. So as much as I feel bad bringing it up, I also feel like you can't ignore that that's their goal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very clearly the goal. I mean, it's a lot of teams' goals. Yeah, a lot of teams want a shot at Giannis.
That's what Miami did this week, right? Like, they cleared cap space for 2021 to go after Giannis.
Yeah. Yep.
And Pat Riley's done it before, so maybe he does it again, but I don't know. Not to derail us back to the Heat, but my concern with Miami long-term as a free agent destination is I'm not totally sold Jimmy Butler is in 2 years is still going to be the same guy, because he's 30 now.
Yeah.
But I think we kind of covered the trade deadline. We covered the buyout period. We covered the Pistons and contenders. I'm not sure what else there is really to talk about this week. It's kind of a lot of we got to see how teams look now that the trades are done and head towards All-Star and build towards the playoffs. But I just can't say enough. I keep saying I love watching basketball this season. It's been a fun season as an observer.
I agree with that. As a whole.
Yeah.
Duncan, anything you want to plug?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Duncan Smith NBA. I read my Pistons stuff on Forbes, and I'm also now the site expert for Hoops Habit. So for your general NBA curiosity and need and research, go to that site. That's about it.
And thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Anything for you to plug today, Josh?
Nothing really today. Nope. I'm good. Just want to say, Hoops Habit, I think, was the first like major blog outlet that I wrote for way back in the day. So that's really cool. It's a good site. So I would encourage people that want to write about the NBA to give it a look. It's a good place.
Appreciate that.
And thank you to everybody who watched on Twitch today. Thank you to everybody watching on YouTube. I appreciate you guys. And we'll have another episode next Saturday.